Number 1. The Mystery of the Kentucky Meat Shower. On March 3, 1876, one Mrs. Crouch was working in her yard in Bath County, Kentucky, making soap, when suddenly meat which looked like beef began to fall all around her. The sky was perfectly clear at the time, falling like large snowflakes and settling all around the 5,000 square foot yard. Pieces of flesh ranging in size from about 2 inches square to 4 dotted the ground and were even stuck on the fences. When it first appeared, the meat was said to be fresh, and, accordingly, 2 unidentified but brave men even sampled it. They claimed it tasted a bit gamey, like mutton or even venison. The story was published in the New York Times on March 9, and it caught the attention of Leopold Brandeis, who was able to get his hands on a sample that had been preserved in glycerin. After examining it, Brandeis declared that the meat wasn't a supernatural phenomenon, or in fact, according to him, even meat at all, but a substance called nostoc. Nostoc has been known to scientists since at least the 16th century, when it was named by Paracelsus. As with the Kentucky shower, early on people believed that nostoc fell from the sky in large chunks, or more rightly blobs, and to medieval people it was known as witch's jelly and troll's butter. Technically a genus of cyanobacteria that live in colonies, it's not clear when people realized that nostoc does not, in fact, come from the sky, but rather lives in the soil and on moist surfaces. When dry, it is easy to overlook nostoc as it appears as a dark, flaky crust. However, after a rain, nostoc will swell up into jelly-like masses. This led people to think it fell from the sky with rain, thus one of its nicknames, star jelly. Edible and said to taste like chicken or frog, Brandeis was convinced that the Crouches had nothing more than bacterial blobs on their hands. However, although his theory accounted for some of the details in the report, he had overlooked 2 important points. Eyewitness testimony claims they actually saw the substance falling from the sky, and it was a clear day with no rain. Further investigations were also conducted, including one by histologist, Dr. Amede Edwards, who also examined the chunks. He concluded that the substance was definitely not nostoc, but rather hunks of flesh. From the tissue samples he had, it appeared to come from the lungs of either a horse or a human baby. A third investigation by another histologist, Dr. J.W.S. Arnold, confirmed the presence of lung tissue, but also found animal cartilage. Subsequent investigations confirmed both histologists' findings and also revealed muscular tissue. Finally, one man provided a theory that covered all of the facts. L.D. Costenbean, M.D., a professor of chemistry at the Louisville College of Pharmacy, published an article on the matter that same year in the Louisville Medical Journal. Costenbean concluded that the best explanation was that, supplied by an old Ohio farmer, the meat had been vomited by several vultures who were flying too high to be seen. Some varieties of vulture can fly as high as 40,000 feet. For reference, Mount Everest is about 29,029 feet. Given that the chunks fell from a great height, they were scattered by the wind over a relatively large area. Both the turkey vulture, Cathartes aura, and the black vulture, Corygyps atratus, are found in that part of Kentucky, and both have been observed projectile vomiting the contents of their stomachs, sometimes in or just before they take flight. They particularly do this in the presence of a predator, with the discarded contents of their stomach simultaneously distracting the predator, while also lightening the vulture's load for flight. When one vomits, this also often induces others nearby to vomit as well. As to why this particular flock of vultures chose to vomit mid-flight is anybody's guess, but at least the theory seems the most plausible explanation for this bizarre phenomenon. Explanation. Number 2. The unsolved mystery behind the man in the iron mask. Shrouded in mystery for over 350 years, the story of the man in the iron mask has been a focal point for many historians and served as an inspiration for numerous writers and filmmakers. A movie starring Leonardo DiCaprio and a novel by Alexander Dumas are among the many fictional accounts of the man in the iron mask. However, it is for sure that the man in the iron mask was a real person, and over the centuries many historians and authors tried to solve the mystery of who is this mysterious man, and it has been suggested that he might have been Louis Ziv's brother, or even his son, and others claim that he might have been an English nobleman. It is said that during the reign of King Louis XIV this man was held in the Bastille and other French jails for several decades until he died in 1703. For years, his identity remained unknown, just as the reason of why he was in jail. But what is more interesting is the fact that no one ever saw his face, as this enigmatic man always wore a black velvet mask over his face. Voltaire, who was imprisoned at Bastille in 1717, claimed that this man had been wearing a mask made of iron since 1661, and according to Voltaire's Questions sur l'Encyclopédie, he was the illegitimate brother of Louis XIV. On the other hand, Alexander Dumas claimed that the man in the iron mask was Louis Ziv's twin brother, who was the legitimate king of France, as he was born minutes before Louis XIV. There are countless unproven theories and attempts to solve the mystery of the man in the iron mask, and there are numerous candidates proposed, including a French general, Italian diplomat, French playwright, and actor Molière, the father of Louis XIV, and Eustache Dodger, a valet. However, the earliest accounts of the man can be traced back to 1669, when Marquis de Louvois sent a letter to the governor of Pignerol prison, Benin d'Auvergne de Saint-Mars, informing him that a prisoner named Eustache Dodger was about to be transported to Pignerol prison. According to many historians, Eustache Dodger is the most popular of all candidates for being the man in the iron mask. Paul Sanino, a professor of history at the University of California, Santa Barbara, claims that Eustache Dodger is the mysterious man in the iron mask. Serious historians have long ago discounted the legend popularized by Voltaire and Dumas that he was the twin brother of Louis XIV. They are pretty much in agreement that his name was Eustache Dodger, that he only occasionally wore the mask, and that when he did wear a mask, it was velvet, not iron, Sanino said in a statement. They are also quite sure that he was a valet. What they have not been able to figure out is whose valet he was, and for what possible reason he was held under tight security for over 30 years. In his book, The Search for the Man in the Iron Mask, a historical detective story, Paul Sanino writes that Eustache Dodger worked as a valet for the treasurer of Cardinal Mazarin, the principal minister of France, who managed to accumulate a large fortune over the years, and according to Sanino, Eustache Dodger believed that Cardinal Mazarin stole some of the money. Read another story from us. The legend of the martyred Saint Escrava Anastasia, the beautiful slave girl who was forced to wear a face mask. Dodger must have blabbed at the wrong time. He was informed when arrested that, if he revealed his identity to anyone, he would immediately be killed, Sanino said. Number 3. The Hinterkaifeck Mystery. Hinterkaifeck, a small farmstead situated between the Bavarian towns of Ingolstadt and Schrabenhausen, approximately 70 kilometers north of Munich, was the scene of one of the most puzzling crimes in German history. On the evening of March 31, 1922, the 6 inhabitants of the farm were killed with a mattock. The murder is still unsolved. The 6 victims were the farmer Andreas Gruber, 63, and his wife Casilia, 72, their widowed daughter Victoria Gabriel, 35, and her 2 children, Casilia, 7, and Joseph, 2, and the maid Maria Baumgartner, 44. The 2-year-old Joseph was rumored to be the son of Victoria and her father Andreas, who had an incestuous relationship. The Gruber family lived at Hinterkaifeck, which was situated next to a forest. Maria was new to the farm, having only just arrived oddly that day as a replacement for the previous maid that had left, claiming that she thought the farm was haunted by a demon. Strange things. A few days prior to the crime, farmer Andreas Gruber told neighbors about discovering footprints in the snow leading from the edge of the forest to the farm, but none leading back. He also spoke about hearing footsteps in the attic and finding an unfamiliar newspaper on the farm. Furthermore, the house keys went missing several days before the murders, but none of this was reported to the police. On the night of March 31, 1922, someone managed to lure 4 of the family members into the barn before murdered them all with an axe handle. The killer then went into the house, where they killed 2-year-old Joseph, who was sleeping in his cot in his mother's bedroom, as well as the new maid, Maria Baumgartner, in her bedchamber. Horrifyingly, the autopsy showed that young Kazilia had been alive for quite some time after being attacked, tearing her own hair out as she lay dying in the barn. The killer then went into the house and killed Joseph and Maria in their beds. The family was noticed as missing several days later, when none of them had been seen for a few days, and young Kazilia had not attended school. Neighbors went to check on them and discovered the bodies. After extensive police investigations, a viable suspect was not found. And, as if the situation wasn't already horrible enough, it actually gets worse. Terrifying theory. A terrifying theory concerning the murders is that someone may have sneaked into the house, lived undiscovered up in the attic for a few days, and then come out and murder the house's occupants. To further add to this theory, in the days that the bodies were certainly lying dead in the barn, neighbors reported that they had seen smoke rising from the chimneys. Also, someone had been feeding the farm's cattle. So, if someone had done this, it also seemed as if they had stayed for several days after the murders to take care of the place. Number 4. The original Night Stalker. The Sacramento area was terrorized by a brazen serial rapist who was nicknamed the East Area Rapist. The rapist was suspected of at least 44 rapes in Northern California in the 70s. This unknown man first targeted women who lived alone, but eventually became more brazen and raped women who did not live alone. He bound and blindfolded his victims, then roamed their house as he taunted and threatened their lives, ultimately raping the woman and leaving. When men were present, he often tied the man up in another room. The perpetrator would at times stack dishes on the people who were tied up, in order to serve as a deterrent to the bound people from trying to escape, and as audible warning to the attacker that the individuals were trying to, or had escaped their bindings. The rapist eventually ventured down south to Southern California in 1979, and continued to terrorize Southern California residents until 1986. It was stated that he killed at least 10 people in the Southern California area during this time period. His first few Southern California victims were couples who were home together when they were attacked. None of them survived. Dr. Robert Offerman and his girlfriend Deborah Manning were shot to death in Dr. Offerman's Santa Barbara home on December 30, 1979. A few months later, March 13, 1980, Charlene and Lyman Smith were found murdered in their Ventura home. Authorities believed that the Ventura and Santa Barbara murders were connected. The killer then headed further south to Laguna Niguel, where he killed Keith Harrington, and then raped and also murdered Keith's wife Patricia on August 19, 1980. The next victim was a woman who was home alone named Manuela Whitten. Manuela was killed on February 27, 1981, while her husband was spared because he was in the hospital at the time. Then, back in Santa Barbara, between July 26 and 27, 1981, Chiri Domingo and Gregory Sanchez were brutally murdered in Chiri's home. Surprisingly, the killer stopped his murderous rampage for almost 5 years until May 4, 1986, when he came upon 18-year-old Janelle Cruz of Irvine, California. Janelle was unable to go with her family on a vacation to Mexico, and thus left to tend to the house, while the rest of her family was gone. The killer entered her home that night and sexually assaulted and murdered her. Janelle's rape and murder was the last suspected murder of the rapist. In the years following the rapes and murders, several surviving victims claimed that their attacker had called and taunted them over the phone. In 1996, Orange County Sheriff's Department detectives linked 6 of the murders to one killer through DNA. In 2001, a criminal expert connected the East Area rapes to the spree of serial killings throughout California by use of DNA evidence. Police believe that the killer may be responsible for other murders, such as the 1975 murder of Claude Snelling, and the February 2, 1978 murders of Brian and Katie Magyar. Authorities believe that the killer has not been heard from since 1986 because he is either in prison for a different crime or dead in a different state. It is possible that if he is dead in another state, the authorities in that state don't realize that this dead person is a serial rapist and killer who is wanted in California. The killer is described as a man who is 5'7" to 5'11" with blue or hazel eyes who would likely be his 60s if alive today. In the mid-2000s, DNA testing initially showed that the Offerman Manning murders and Dominguez Sanchez murders were committed by a killer separate from the original Night Stalker. However, in 2011, advanced DNA testing confirmed that these 4 victims were also killed by Irons. In June of 2016, the FBI announced that there was enough evidence to connect the murders of Brian and Katie Magyar to the Irons case. It was also announced that there is a $50,000 reward leading to the assailant's capture. However, to this day, he remains unidentified. Number 5. The hum. The hum is a phenomenon from all over the world. It is a widespread, invasive, low-frequency humming or rumbling noise that is not audible to all people. It has been heard in the UK all the way to New Zealand. The historical record of the hum is crucial because if the current version as narrated by Deeming is correct, many theories can immediately be ruled out. After all, cell phones and HARP didn't exist until decades after the worldwide hum was first documented in England in the late 1960s. I currently have a researcher digging into the Times of London Digital Archive to search for mentions of the hum going back to the 18th and 19th centuries. If convincing examples are found, then the direction of my research will shift dramatically because all modern technologies could be ruled out. In my view, there are currently 4 hypotheses for the source of the world hum that survive the most superficial scrutiny. The first hypothesis, argued by Deeming, and the one I'm currently pursuing, is that the hum is rooted in very low-frequency, VLF, radio transmissions. It's increasingly accepted now that the human body will sometimes experience electromagnetic energy and interpret it in a way that creates sounds. This was established for high-frequency energy by the American neuroscientist Alan Free in his infamous microwave hearing experiments, which showed that certain radio frequencies can actually be heard as sounds. Today, there are biophysical models that predict and explain the impact VLF energy has on living tissue. I have designed and built a VLF radio blocking box that should be able to test whether VLF radio frequencies are a prerequisite for generating the hum. The second hypothesis is that the hum is the grand accumulation of low-frequency sound and human-generated infrasound, sounds with audio frequencies below roughly 20 Hz, and which can be felt more than they can be heard. This includes everything from highway noise to all manner of industrial activity. The third is that the hum is a terrestrial or geological phenomenon that generates low-frequency sounds or perceptions of those sounds. For example, there is a well-documented history of animals predicting earthquakes and taking action to save themselves. From an evolutionary perspective, there may be survival value in having members of a population highly sensitive to some types of vibrations. When it comes to the hum, some humans may have a similar physiological mechanism in place. The fourth is that the hum is an internally generated phenomenon, perhaps rooted in a particular anatomical variation, genetic predisposition or the result of toxicity and medication. The hum is now the subject of serious media coverage and, increasingly, scientific scrutiny. The overall goal of my project, and the people who contribute to it, is to find the source of the hum and, if possible, stop it. If the hum is man-made, then my task is to raise public awareness and advocate turning away from the technologies that are causing it. If the source is exogenous and natural, there's the possibility that there may be no escape from it, apart from masking it with background sounds. Of course, there is the remote possibility that one of the more exotic explanations will prove to be correct. But, as in all science, it seems best to start with what we know and is plausible, as opposed to what we don't know and is implausible. Number 6. The Mary Celeste. The Mary Celeste is one of the most famous examples of a ghost ship, a ship found with its entire crew missing under strange circumstances. This vessel was found abandoned, but in reasonable order, off the coast of Portugal. There was no sign of the crew, leading to mass speculation. On November 7, 1872, the 282-ton brigantine Mary Celeste set sail from New York Harbor on its way to Genoa, Italy. On board were the ship's captain, Benjamin S. Briggs, his wife, Sarah, and their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia, along with 8 crew members. Less than a month later, on December 5, a passing British ship called De Gracia spotted Mary Celeste at full sail and adrift about 400 miles east of the Azores, with no sign of the captain, his family or any of the crew. Aside from several feet of water in the hold and a missing lifeboat, the ship was undamaged and loaded with 6 months' worth of food and water. Mary Celeste had a shadowy past. Originally christened Amazon, it was given a new name after a series of mishaps, including the sudden illness and death of its first captain, and a collision with another ship in the English Channel. An investigation into whether to grant payment by its insurers to the De Gracia's crew for salvaging the ghost ship found no evidence of foul play. Mary Celeste would sail under different owners for 12 years before its last captain deliberately ran it aground in Haiti as part of an attempted insurance fraud. In 2001, best-selling novelist and adventurer Clive Cussler claimed to have found the wreck of Mary Celeste, but later analysis of the timbers retrieved from the ship he found showed the wood was still living at least a decade after Mary Celeste sank. Meanwhile, one of the most famous maritime mysteries in history endures. Why would an experienced captain such as Briggs, or his sailors, abandon a perfectly sound ship? Theories over the years have ranged from mutiny and pirate attack to assault by giant octopus or sea monster, while the more scientifically minded proposed an explosion caused by fumes from the 1,700 barrels of crude alcohol in the ship's hold. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle even weighed in with a short story published in 1884, in which the inhabitants of the ghost ship fell victim to an ex-slave seeking vengeance. On the less sensationalized end, an investigation chronicled in the 2007 documentary The True Story of the Mary Celeste was able to offer no definite conclusion, but did suggest a scenario in which a faulty chronometer, rough seas and a clogged onboard pump could have led Briggs to order the ship abandoned shortly after sighting land on November 25, 1872. According to the last entry in the ship's logbook, made that morning, Mary Celeste was within sight of the Azores island of Santa Maria, some 500 miles from where the De Gracia would find it 9 days later. Number 7. D.B Cooper Mystery. Physical evidence that may be connected to the unsolved 1971 D.B Cooper hijacking case is now in the hands of FBI agents in California. The evidence, a frayed 18-inch-long nylon strap that may have come from the parachute D.B Cooper used when he escaped from a plane with $200,000, was found in a mound of dirt in the deep Pacific Northwest mountains nearly 2 weeks ago. It was turned in Friday to the FBI's Ventura County office by acclaimed D.B Cooper sleuth Tom Colbert, a Los Angeles TV and film producer. Well, after 6 years of gathering information with the 40-member cold case team, I'm ecstatic that they are considering this, Colbert told Fox News during an interview Sunday, referring to the FBI. Colbert is hoping the discovery of the nylon strap will reignite interest in the case within the FBI. The FBI announced last year that it would no longer actively investigate the D.B Cooper case to focus on other investigative priorities. The FBI interviewed hundreds of people, tracked down leads around the country, and considered 800 suspects during its 45-year probe. The FBI confirmed meeting with Colbert. Any evidence brought to the FBI will be evaluated for its value, FBI Los Angeles office spokeswoman Laura I. Miller said in an email Sunday to Fox News. This case falls under the purview of FBI Seattle, so my understanding is that it will be forwarded there. ANS Dietrich Williams in the FBI's Seattle office told Fox News on Sunday that the FBI does not typically confirm or deny the routine activities we perform in the course of our investigative work, to include meetings or receiving tips. She added, "However, I can reassure you that the FBI's Seattle field office will review any physical items possibly related to the parachute or money taken by the Norjack hijacker. Based on that review, the FBI will take any appropriate action." In 1971, a man calling himself Dan Cooper, wearing a black tie-and suit, boarded a Seattle-bound Boeing 727 in Oregon and told a flight attendant he had a bomb in a briefcase. He gave her a note demanding ransom. After the plane landed, he released the 36 passengers in exchange for $200,000 in ransom money and parachutes. The ransom was paid in $20 bills. The hijacker then ordered the plane to fly to Mexico, but near the Washington-Oregon border he jumped and was never seen or heard from again. 9 years later, a boy found a rotting package full of $20 bills near the Columbia River. The $5,800 matched the ransom money serial numbers. The FBI has never ruled out the possibility that the hijacker was killed in the jump, which took place in a rainstorm at night in rough-wooded terrain. The hijacker's clothing and footwear were also unsuitable for a rough landing. Over the years, the most lasting image of D.B. Cooper, who became somewhat of a legend, may be the 2 sketches the FBI released of the suspect. Colbert said his team, led by an ex-FBI agent, found a nylon strap while digging in a spot right where a credible source claimed the chute and remaining money are buried. FoxNews.com reported on the finding last week. Colbert said his team compared the nylon strap to a parachute like the one the sky jumper used. One of my former law enforcement officers that studied the sample said the stitching pattern appears to match, he said. After closing the case, the FBI issued an advisory that should specific physical evidence emerge related specifically to the parachutes or the money taken by the hijacker, individuals with those materials should contact their local FBI field office. Colbert said that is why he went to the Ventura County FBI office and met with an agent there. "We sat down with him and went over the details of the chain of custody from the dig to me," he said. Colbert, who maintains a website, dbcooper.com, and his team of investigators believe D.B. Cooper is Robert Rackstraw, a 73-year-old Army veteran from San Diego with a prior criminal record. Investigators questioned Rackstraw about the D.B. Cooper case in 1978 and eliminated him as a suspect. Rackstraw has repeatedly denied any involvement in the caper. Colbert said that during the meeting with the FBI he also gave the agent information about 2 men in their 80s who he believes may have knowledge of the skyjacking. He said he also told the agent where the nylon strap was found. He described the site as a lumber farm, but declined to be more specific. He said he told the agent the site is yours. Number 8. Terror, the greatest glutton of all time. Terror is a Frenchman who had an insatiable appetite. He was able to eat and eat, but remained constantly hungry. He ate so much his parents kicked him out as a teenager. He went on to travel France as a street performer and would eat corks, stones, live animals and basketful of apples. Despite all of this, Terror never put on weight and looked of normal appearance. He still remains an anomaly today. Terror was born in France in the 1700s. He joined a traveling show after being kicked out of his house as a teen, for his parents could no longer provide for him. A medical mystery, Terror seemed to have an unending appetite. He could easily eat his own weight in meat. Testing of his extraordinary stomach began after he suffered extreme exhaustion serving in the French Revolutionary Army. Despite being granted quadruple rations, he stole and ate anything he could. Doctors learned of his eating habits and detained him at the military hospital. While there, Terror ate a meal meant for 15 laborers, a live cat, except its bones, and he vomited up its fur. A live eel, he swallowed it whole, 30 pounds of raw bull's lungs and liver the army believed he could be put to use for France. and made him swallow a wooden box with secrets inside. Terror went to Germany in disguise but couldn't speak German, so was immediately suspected. Sources differ on what happened to him after being caught. Terror returned to France and told surgeons he was desperate for any cure. Unfortunately, all attempts failed. He would sneak outside the hospital on diets and fight with stray dogs for food. Eventually he was caught drinking the blood of patients at the hospital and attempting to eat bodies in the morgue. He was eventually chased from the hospital after a baby disappeared, and he was suspected of eating it. At the end of his life, Terror contacted the old surgeon, who tried to cure him, and said that he was dying from a gold fork stuck in his intestines. On the contrary, the surgeon recognized that he was dying of tuberculosis. When Terror died, the surgeon was the only one who would agree to autopsy him. Autopsy results: abnormally wide gullet, abnormally large liver and gallbladder ulcers all over the stomach, jaws opened, and you could see straight down into the stomach. Guess this just means a huge esophagus. Pus-filled body, no golden fork to this day. No one knows what caused his appetite. Fun fact, he was also quite slim. Number 9. The Mystery of the Max Headroom TV Hack. On Sunday, November 22, 1987, residents of Chicago sat down to catch up on local news. On station WGN-TV it was showing the 9 o'clock news. At 9:14 p.m., as sports anchor Dan Roan was reporting in the highlights of the Chicago Bears game, the screen went blank. After 15 seconds an image appeared of what appeared to be someone wearing a Max Headroom mask, stood in front of a spinning corrugated iron sheet, mimicking the style of the eponymous 80s virtual TV presenter. He bounced around to a soundtrack of Static Kiss when after 30 seconds a technician at the station switched transmission frequencies and a confused Dan Roan returned to the screen. The shell-shocked presenter said, "Well, if you're wondering what's happened, so am I. And so was everyone else." The technicians suspected that the signal intrusion must have come from inside the station, but after a sweep of the building nothing was found. Then later that night, on station WTTW they were showing a rerun of a Doctor Who episode Horror of Fang Rock, when at 11:15 p.m. the signal was hijacked. The screen cut to the same guy in a Max Headroom mask from earlier. This time there was sound. The technicians at WTTW had no way of switching the frequency, and so the signal intrusion ran for a full 1 minute and 20 seconds before switching back to the Doctor Who episode. The switchboards of both WGN and WTTW were jammed with confused callers. Federal agents were on the case within hours. Investigation: one of the weirdest and rarest of crimes, the intrusion of a TV broadcast. The Chicago Tribune ran with the headline, "Powerful Video Prankster CCC Could Become Max Jailroom," and WGN ran it as their top story, under the title "TV Video Pirate." Both the FBI and the FCC began to investigate the crime, swearing to bring the culprits to justice. WTTW spokesman Anders Jochum said, "It is a very serious matter, because illegal interference of a broadcast signal is a violation of federal law. The government were worried about such intrusions of TV broadcasts, and the fact that it appeared some amateur pranksters had managed it was of great concern." This wasn't the first incident of signal intrusion. On April 27, 1986, there had been an intrusion in an HBO broadcast of the 1985 espionage movie The Falcon and the Snowman. At around 12:32 a.m. a test card pattern appeared, with a message superimposed on it, protesting the recent price rise for the channel. This was the first ever recorded incident of TV signal intrusion. Within days of that first intrusion, FCC investigators had found their intruder. Captain Midnight was a satellite technician named John McDougall, whose mistake had apparently been to use a relatively uncommon text generator program to display the text on screen, a clue that led FCC investigators to McDougall's employer, Central Florida Teleport, a satellite uplink company in Ocala, Florida. After the Captain Midnight case, the government passed a federal law making satellite jamming a felony. The incident, known as the Max Headroom broadcast signal intrusion, has never been solved. There are theories, from it being the work of a local hacker group to disgruntled employees of the WGN TV station itself, particularly as the hacker makes direct references to WGN and one of their presenters, Chuck Swirsky. But generally the speech, or what can be made out, seems to be random, almost drunken ramblings. People have tried to transcribe the transmission, which contains references to the real Max Headroom's Coca-Cola commercial and humming of the theme tune to the animation series Clutch Cargo. The fact that a copy of the incident exists is due to Dr. Who fans taping the show. Many were deeply annoyed that the intrusion spoiled their recordings. Number 10. June and Jennifer Gibbons. That's the best descriptor medical experts who met identical siblings June and Jennifer Gibbons could come up with to describe the young women. They didn't speak. They walked in a synchronized fashion. They were the silent twins. And they unsettled everyone who came into contact with them. Everyone, that is, except for Sunday Times investigative journalist Marjorie Wallace. Wallace befriended the twins in the 1980s and wrote about their shared life and its mysterious end in the 1986 biography The Silent Twins. That's a version of the cover above. Born in 1963, June and Jennifer were moved by their Barbadian parents to a small town off the coast of Wales called Haverfordwest. Known for its tranquility, the town and the twins had but one thing in common: quiet. Amazingly, the two had never spoken to anyone else their entire lives. Instead, they communicated with each other in a strange bird-like language only they could understand. Haverfordwest was a predominantly white town, and the siblings were consistently bullied at school because of their race. Their continued resistance to speak to outsiders only resulted in more exclusion. Eventually, June and Jennifer withdrew from society entirely and turned to literature as an outlet for their pent-up aggressions. At age 14, the twins were separated in an attempt to encourage socialization. They responded by slipping into catatonic states. Doctors and family members reunited the siblings thereafter, and they spent the next few years holed up their room, performing intricate plays for one another, and writing extensively in their diaries. It was on the blank page that June and Jennifer revealed the darkness of their bond, exploring the joint need and hatred they felt toward one another. June wrote, "Nobody suffers the way I do, not with a sister, with a husband, yes, with a wife, yes, with a child, yes, but this sister of mine, a dark shadow robbing me of sunlight, is my one and only torment." Born 10 minutes apart, Jennifer viewed her older sibling as mightier in every way: looks, brains, wits. For her part, June sensed the envy, writing, "She wants us to be equal. There is a murderous gleam in her eye. Dear Lord, I am scared of her. She is not normal. Someone is driving her insane. It is me." A chilling excerpt from Jennifer's diary further illustrates their shared disdain and possibly sheds light on why the two took to inflicting bodily harm on one another. "We have become fatal enemies in each other's eyes. We feel the irritating deadly rays come out of our bodies, stinging each other's skin. I say to myself, can I get rid of my own shadow? Impossible or not possible? Without my shadow, would I die? Without my shadow, would I gain life, be free or left to die? Without my shadow, which I identify with a face of misery, deception, murder." Such writing was a major creative outlet for June and Jennifer Gibbons. They even penned a few novels, though the books continued themes of mayhem and violence. June's Pepsi Cola addict is about a teen who's seduced by his schoolteacher, then sent away to a reformatory, where he fights off the advances of a homosexual guard. Jennifer's Discomania is a disturbing little tale about the insane violence that goes down at a disco. The books failed to make a serious splash in the literary world, so the Gibbons twins found another way to get noticed: criminal mischief. They got their thrills from petty theft, choking each other, and, eventually, burning buildings to the ground. It's the latter offense that landed them in court. A judge ruled their deviant behavior combined with their severe social disorders were grounds for confinement. He sent them to Broadmoor Hospital, the very same high-security mental facility where legendary British gangster Ronnie Cray lived out the remainder of his life. At Broadmoor, the doctors found June and Jennifer to be deeply disturbed, even dangerous. The two took turns eating, one indulging one day, while the other starved. And though they were split up and housed in cells on opposite ends of the hospital, nurses often found them eerily frozen in the same distinct poses. This went on for 11 years, until doctors agreed to transfer the twins to Caswell Clinic, a lower security facility in Bridgend, Wales. Only one of the sisters would survive the relocation. Wallace claimed that during her final visit with the twins at Broadmoor, Jennifer abruptly stated over a cup of tea, "Marjorie, I'm going to have to die." When Wallace asked why, Jennifer just said, "Because we decided." Indeed, as Wallace states in The Silent Twins, the Gibbons siblings made a pact at Broadmoor. One of them had to die, so the other could live a normal life. In March of 1993, June and Jennifer Gibbons, age 31, were transferred to Caswell. Upon arrival, Jennifer appeared unresponsive. Doctors rushed her to the hospital, where she was pronounced dead. Cause of death: acute myocarditis, or a sudden and lethal inflammation of the heart. Doctors found no evidence of poison in Jennifer's system. According to June, Jennifer simply placed her head on her twin sibling's shoulder. She then took her last breath and said, "At long last, we're out." After Jennifer's death in 1993, June went on to live a so-called normal life. She sat down for a revealing interview with the New Yorker's Hilton Als, stating all she wanted now was to get married to and have children with a Rasta man, like Bob Marley. As for her sister, Jennifer, she's buried under a headstone engraved with a poem written by June. It reads, "We once were two, we two made one, we no more two through life, be one, rest in peace."